Sebastian DiGiovanni, United States Army, Iraq. Sam's one of many Iraq veterans I've interviewed, and we'll be producing a film on the Iraq War, the War on Terror. Met him in Cottonwood, Arizona. It was October 29, 2013, almost 11 years ago. And you'll see it in his eyes, folks. You'll see it. Just one of my best stories from one of my younger veterans. He served at 11 Bravo as an infantryman and 11 Charlie mortars. Was assigned to a scout unit and also MI counterintelligence. And just a great, great interview. I just watched it before I turned this camera on again. It just really touched my heart. And I think it'll touch yours too. Sam was with the 40th Infantry Division over in Iraq. 2 tours between 2003 2005. And I just am so grateful that he told me his story. He's been suffering from a traumatic brain injury back then. Hope he's doing well now. And he wrote a book, Survive Your Tour in War and Peace. And this is available on Amazon. I've got a copy of it here. And I would encourage you to get it. It's not a long read, it's a short read. But it'll give you his insight. It's like an unofficial military guide, which could save your pay grade or maybe your life. So, Sam, God bless you. Thank you. You and Heidi and your kids, who are probably all grown up now. But just thank you for telling me your story. I also want to thank SK Ofstad. SK has been a supporter of my work for a long time. We are friends back even when he was deployed. He's an Iraq veteran. He was a chaplain, a captain, Captain Ofstad. I'm going to be interviewing him again here soon and get his complete story. I did an interview with him before a deployment in 2010. But I'm going to do an updated interview of his tour of duty. And he's just a great man. He's an author like Sam, and he's published several books on Amazon, SK Ofstad. He also works with kids, GAME, Giving Adolescents New Goals. It's a great group that helps underprivileged kids with sports and academic activities. Just a great, great man and a great heart to serve. And thank you, SK, for allowing me an opportunity to share another story on my YouTube channel. God bless you and your family. Folks, if you'd like to become a part of this family of supporters and sponsors, I would welcome you. There's information in the video description and in the comment section of my videos. Thank you for those that I'm hearing from the last message. And those that are just considering donating to my work, you can do that also. Voices of History Radio is still going strong. Been listened to in over 50 countries. And I've got a select group of people there. I wish I had more, but I'm not complaining. I'm thankful for everybody listening. And it's really for your benefit, not mine, because the stories are priceless, folks. Freedom is not free. Freedom is earned. And contained within all these stories is why we're free, folks. In a day where they're trying to erase history out of our textbooks with our kids, I'm trying to continue sharing these stories of history. History is best learned from those who were there, and I've got the real stories I like to tell people. So, okay, Masters of the Air, my real stories are coming up this year. My airmen stories from World War II. I keep finding more and more in my archives. It's amazing. But I'm just grateful. My heart's full. I thank God I can serve Him and my country through the lens of my camera. I was a bit too young for Vietnam, so there's always been guilt for not serving like that. But I'm doing a service now, I believe, to my country, and I'm so proud to be able to do this and bring you these stories. So God bless you. Thank you for those of you who have supported my work. And thank you for sharing the videos and subscribing to this channel. All right, I will talk to you later on another broadcast. Enjoy Sam's story. Let me hear from you. God bless you. going to start. First name, pronounce your last name.
DiGiovanni.
Okay. Okay. And how old are you now?
I'm 37.
37. Okay. What year did you join the military?
1996.
1996. What made you decide to want to do that?
Probably playing with too many G.I. Joes as a kid.
You're kidding, right?
No.
Okay. And how old were you in 1996? You're pretty young.
Yeah, I think I was about 19.
So kind of out of high school, you decided to go into the military?
Yeah, I was an odd duck, and nothing really fit in civilian life, and at first I thought I made a huge mistake, you know, basic training, AIT, but eventually I got it. I always wondered as a kid what was in those cargo pockets of those little G.I. Joes, and I found out that it's MRE trash.
Where was basic training?
Fort Benning, Georgia.
Okay, just like, I think Sean went there too, Sean Bouchard yesterday.
Oh yeah, good guy.
So you were 11 Bravo?
11 Bravo, 11 Bang Bang, yeah.
So you wanted to go in and be a soldier?
Mm-hmm. I had no idea. They don't tell you in war movies what is going to happen afterwards when you get back, if you get back. It's a long process. I'm still dealing with it 8 years later.
Well, just kind of walk me through it a little bit. You go to basic training, you go to your advanced training, and then where did you go?
My first stop was Korea.
Okay. And you were just assigned there for a year or two or whatever?
They have a thing called a wish list, and you get to pick anywhere you want in the world that they have a base. And if you're lucky, you get that place. Well, they must have had a slot to fill because the data processor woman was really talking up Korea, how it's beautiful. And so, not really knowing much about geography, I said, okay, put me down for that. Mm-hmm. Well, of course I got that place because nobody wants to go there. And that was a year. It was a peacekeeping mission. There was some saber rattling, you know, being close to the DMZ. They do play the propaganda music across enemy lines, and it was nothing like combat, but it was enough to kind of leave a bad taste in my mouth for the military. They didn't really seem to want us over there. I can't imagine fighting a war in Korea like my grandfather did. The elements are so bad over there. It's so cold, and it's hot in the summers, and so I gave the military a little break. Went back into civilian life for a while, you know, a year or two. And then I kind of missed the structure. So I went back in, I reclassed as an 11 Charlie, which is mortars. Did that for a while, went to recon school. I was attached to a scout unit. And then I went to work for MI. Counterintelligence. Did that for a while.
So you did 2 tours of Iraq?
I did. They were back-to-back tours.
So where were you on September 11th, 2001?
I was in the reserves at that time. I did active duty reserves National Guard. Well, now it's International Guard. But I lived in Anaheim, and I wasn't much of a news watcher. And I thought, you know what, it's my day off. I don't know, I had some ridiculous job doing something over there. And I thought I'd go to Disneyland. And the park was shut down. So I went home and flipped the news on, and sure enough, I couldn't believe what I saw. And then I had a new sense of purpose. I took my reserve time a lot more seriously. And that's when I decided that I should look into deploying. It took a little while to get my ducks all in a row, but 2003, I found myself with the 40th Infantry Division. We were going to deploy to Bosnia for a 6-month peacekeeping mission. That mission got scrubbed. We picked up a new mission for Iraq. It's been declassified, but at the time it was classified, so we kept our original orders in place. We were not to tell anyone what we'd be doing over there because it was kind of a new and subjective kind of a mission. We'd be transporting goods, principals, which were important people, CIA, Special Forces, etc., to their rally points wherever they needed to go. And we were to keep that quiet. As far as our employers and families knew, we were going to Bosnia for a 6-month peacekeeping mission. And then as soon as we were in place in Iraq, after our training, which was extensive, we would let everyone know where we were.
So you get to Iraq at what point then, did you say?
2003 was a year of training, and then 2004 we were boots down in Kuwait, and then so 04 and 05.
And you're considered well, you weren't in combat before, but you're one of the older guys. You're already in the military, whereas a lot of young people were deploying over there too, like Sean. But so you're there. I mean, what was the hardest part of that first deployment? I mean, did you engage the enemy? Well, tell me a story. I mean, what was the hardest part for you?
Well, the not knowing. The hardest thing about Iraq was intel would constantly tell us, and I was back with my infantry unit at that time, back at my primary MOS. So intel would tell us, don't touch anything. Everything is a booby trap. And the whole place, at the time, maybe they cleaned it up since then, the whole place is a giant pile of garbage. Nobody wears any uniforms over there, so you don't know who's carrying what. And as far as IEDs, improvised explosive devices, they were everywhere. So the not knowing when it was your time was the hardest. And I should mention that my back-to-back tours, they were 6-month back-to-back tours. So it was a year and then a few months in Kuwait. Before that, training, you know, on culture and all that stuff. But the shorter we got with our time there, the better the insurgents were getting at these IEDs. First they would kill 5 soldiers with an explosion, and then they started to figure out that shrapnel goes a long way. So then their explosive devices were taking out 20 or 30 soldiers. within the blast radius, maybe 10, and then maybe another, I don't know, 10 or 15 at any given time of just being wounded, you know. So
So you were there 6 months, and then there was a 6 month gap, and then you went back 6 more months? Is that what you said?
no, they were back to back, so it was a year.
Okay, I gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Army typically, as far as I know, the Army does 6-month tours, but they usually extend into a year. So
Did you engage the enemy yourself with your unit at all over there while you were there, or is it just these IEDs?
yes, we did have firefights. Sometimes on a weekly basis, sometimes every other day. We did a lot of patrols, convoys. There was a route from our base to the Baghdad International Airport that during the time I was there was the hottest highway in the entire world at that particular time. IED snipers, ambushes, stuff like that. We'd go through Fallujah.
Now, you were wounded at some point, right?
TBIs,
Okay. Tell me
which
what
is,
happened, where you were, what happened, and
well, those are traumatic brain injuries. And I heard somewhere that now they have helmets that can pick up explosions, and we didn't have that yet. So I also heard that you're supposed to be relieved after 2 of those on the battlefield. Well, I didn't want to say anything, and I just, I felt okay. So it's kind of hard as a soldier to know when you're hurt. I was in some blasts that took me off my feet, and a couple of them the only thing I can compare it to is like a television set being on, and then the plug is pulled and there's just a blank screen. That's how I felt in those blasts. We were at the Ministry of Defense, and somebody shot a rocket into it. And I just remember smoke and trying to get everybody out of there. Our principals and each other. There was another mortar blast that happened on our base. We would capture Iraqis, turn them over, or people within our unit would do that, and then reform them, and they'd work on the base. The problem is they were double dipping, so they'd go back out into the red zone where we would go out on our missions. That's where they lived, and then they would get their pass to go and work in the green zone, which was our infrastructure that we built. Well, the people that before us built. Like Sean was there before us, and then he went back into afterwards. He third ID, right?
yeah.
So he relieved us. We were very thankful to see the third ID. What was your question? I'm sorry.
No, I was just asking you about your tours, and then I asked you about if you were injured, and you talked about the traumatic brain injury, and you said you don't know, a soldier doesn't know when he's injured, and you're just talking a little bit about that. So, so it's because of explosions that you have this injury or whatever.
Yes.
You're not really got hit by shrapnel or anything. It's just the concussion of the explosion or something that whatever
Yes.
it does to your head or whatever. I mean, I'm sure.
I was told that it rattles the brain a little bit. It's like they're finding in football players now. It's the same kind of thing.
So that happened twice to you, you said?
5 times.
Oh, wow.
And I've had some memory issues.
You're being seen by the VA and
Yes.
you're a disability of some sort then? Or?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. 100%?
Well, I've had some ratings in the past, but
Is this why you left the military too eventually, or is this?
I did my tour. I got my honorable discharge, and I fulfilled my mission, and then I got out on the time that I was supposed to separate. I didn't want to be a medical hold.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I started getting headaches that I realized there might be a problem. So it's been difficult.
Tell me about when you were there for that year's time. Were there any friends that were, or anybody in your unit that were wounded or killed?
Yes. We were attached to the 1st Cavalry, and those particular guys, the ones that we were attached to, because the 1st Cav it's a pretty big unit. They do air assault stuff, and ours was artillery. We had artillery guys. The kings of battle, and the infantry is the queens of battle. I never liked that title, but anyway, with a lot of heat-guided equipment and stuff like that, artillery, I've heard, has kind of been phased out a little bit. So we were so short-handed with infantry that it was our job to teach and train these guys in combat what we were trained in peacetime to do. So it was frustrating, and it was also sad. There were mistakes made, and even by us, being infantry, I think that the hardest thing that I had to deal with when I got out was the times that I didn't pull the trigger. I know that sounds callous, but there were a couple times I hesitated, and I've been processed through the VA. I had a hard time opening up about it for a while, but cognitive therapy is really a remarkable thing. There was a case where we had a mission where our convoy was full. We were in an up-armored Humvee, which thankfully we had that day, because the 1st Cav took all of our cool stuff. We were attached to them, so we got all of their beater trucks, and they got a lot of our up-armored vehicles that we brought over, which was okay. I mean, the lightweight Humvees were preferred. They didn't offer much protection, but they were a lot faster. But luckily, we happened to swap out with them for this particular mission. I had my machine gun sticking out of the bulletproof glass that dropped about a couple inches, just enough for me to get the muzzle out. And we're going through route, I'll call it Scottish, on our way to the BIOP, which is Baghdad International Airport. And there was, well, let me back up. Before we left the staging area, there was a contractor that wanted to be part of our convoy because he needed to be part of a convoy to be able to leave. They couldn't just drive around on their own out in the red zone. They needed armed protection, or they'd lose their jobs or their lives, of course. Well, the higher-ups said, no, we're full. We can't squeeze you into our convoy because you have to have so many gun trucks for every principal, and sometimes we'd carry, you know, mission-specific principles in the back of our vehicles and whatnot, or detainees, or whatever the case may be. Well, this guy was impatient. He didn't want to wait for the next convoy, so he drove behind us. We were the last gun truck pulling the 6 o'clock. So we had somebody on our turret, and I was pulling the 9 o'clock, which was a sector between 5 and 10. I don't want to bore you with the details. Anyway, so we're about halfway through this route, and I see this kid. He must have been about 16. He was a national over there, and he just didn't look like he belonged on the Meridian, you know, because you've got this stretch of highway going one way, and then you've got a stretch going the other way. We'd hate going back, because if there was an ambush waiting for us, they would count our vehicles, they'd know how many troops we had, and then they'd be ready for us on our way back to the green zone. So that was considered our suicide run. But this was on our way, so we didn't expect much. This guy, this kid, I dropped my window a little bit, had him in my sights, and I could have zapped him, but something, I just couldn't pull the trigger, and he ended up, he was on a cell phone. Did I mention that?
No.
He ended up, that was his switch. So there was an IED that was supposed to take us out. And the guy behind us, John, contractor, who's just, his neck was blown in half, and we couldn't do much about it going to the biop. We pulled a security perimeter around his vehicle, and my ears were still ringing, and we were still a little shook up because that was a big explosion. And we ended up bringing his body over to the airport, where they processed him however they do. And I felt a lot of guilt over that. He had 40 days left in country and a family, and but then there's that
What happened to the kid? Did he take off or what?
yeah, he took off.
Yeah. He's the guy that made the bomb blow up, kid?
Yeah.
For sure? Mm-hmm. I think that killed that man.
There was nobody else out there. So what bothered me for a while is how many more KIAs did this kid get? And he looked like an innocent, I mean, if you saw him here, you'd think he was a freshman in high school. I think it's hard when the United States goes to war because we do have that compassion. And after that happened, my company changed. Whenever we would go someplace that was hot, we'd blast our way out of there. A lot of times war catches you off guard. We were pulling security over this group of houses. We had the advantage because we were on top of a building, me and a buddy of mine. And this hit squad came out of nowhere. And they went into the house, they whacked the whole family, and my buddy and I, again, another time, the only other time that we held our triggers because we just didn't have enough information. There's a lot of Iraqi police over there that would wear plain clothes, and they had vigilante-style justice, so you just never knew. And the reason that we realized we made a bad choice is when we heard the women wailing that were left in the house alive. So we knew that that was a signature of a hit. Because otherwise our ROEs were sometimes confusing. I don't want to get too much into that, but they would change a lot.
So did you find that hit squad, or did they take off, or what?
I don't know what happened to them. It all went to intel, and that was above my pay grade, so.
Were you able to help those women, or were they dead, or what, those that you heard?
That was outside the wire.
Oh, okay.
And I'll never know, because when we had our missions outside the wire, we could go freely outside the wire, but when they were closed off, all we could do is fire support, and it was frustrating.
Okay.
My company and I, we actually preferred being out in the wire over being in the green zone, because although we were bound by our ROEs and we did follow them by the letter, rules of engagement, we felt more productive. And that's about all I have to say about the war.
So did it get routine over there, or was every day an adventure, or what? I mean, you know.
It got routine.
Yeah.
And I was really praying, I'm a Christian, I was really praying to come back. And it was hard to come back into society. It was hard to shake all that off. I'm now remarried. I have a wonderful wife that, she's amazing, and we have 3 great kids. But I still have to stay on top of my well-being. And a lot of soldiers don't really understand what they're getting into. I mean, praise God that we have patriotic people that, I mean, to where we don't need a draft, you know, to where we do have volunteers. But war it's so filthy. It's so hard to get rid of.
Do you feel like you fought for your country then, or do you feel like now, when looking back, that you, quote, fought for your country, fought for freedom, fought for the flag?
I do. I do. I think anybody that joins the military, whether it's peacetime or wartime, you don't know what you're going to get. You're signing that line saying that you're U.S. government property for the duration of your enlistment. And it's something you have to take very seriously. Because the other guys do. And the problem with war is that, well, like with Iraq, the first go around we made a lot of orphans, and they grew up and became insurgents. And that driving force was, you know, a pretty strong one. So our mission was literally to win over the hearts and minds of the Iraqi people. And I think we did a good job of that overall. We wanted to make them our allies. And a lot of people will say that it was an oil war, and we really rebuilt that country as best as we could. I don't want to bore you with more missions, but a lot of what we did had to do with the elections, providing security for, which some of them felt like they were in vain, because the first one that we had, Minister of Defense, Ministry of Oil, all these different department heads, they were all assassinated right after we did our best to let the Iraqi people have a fair election without, you know, the Ba'ath Party or some of these other radical groups influencing them through violence. A lot of it felt like it was in vain, as if, you know, it was hard for us to try to show them about freedom and independence when a lot of the general public over there will fight over very small circumstances. And I did come back with a new sense of appreciation for America, because we are one big melting pot. And even though we do have our problems, we're pretty tolerant overall, as a whole, you know.
You talked about coming back home. I mean, you said it's been a process. It's not been easy. You know, how can you ever leave it behind? I guess you can't, you know, forget it. It's probably with you every day. You know, what's a normal day like for you now?
It's with me every day if I let it. And if I could give any combat veteran advice after getting back, I'd have to say to keep your mind busy, because you're trained a certain way, and then when you live it, that shutoff switch is so hard to find. I can let my paranoia take over anything. And it's a daily struggle. It's something that my wife and I address every day. And thank God I have a patient and loving wife that I'm glad I came home.
So who do you talk to when it gets hard? Your wife, a counselor, God?
All of the above. There's no magic pill. It's group therapy and anything that the VA has to offer. Church, a good circle of friends, God at the top of the list, and my wife right under him, and our kids. But it is a daily struggle. That's all I can say.
So Sam, how did it change you? Before you went into the military, you were this young person. You're still young, but younger
Thanks.
person. And then you go through this whole thing. And so you're here, and then now you're over here. How did it change you, or did it change you at all? I had one Marine tell me when I interviewed him that he was a happy-go-lucky guy, and then he went through he went through Iraq, and he went through the drugs, the alcohol, the depression, all that stuff, and he was a totally different person. I mean, did you go through anything like that?
Yeah, and I think the bottom line is that going through combat, it makes you more aware in a bad way. There's certain things that I wish I didn't know. And I'm glad that filmmakers have such compassion for us. And there's so much support that we get, that the Vietnam veterans and Korean veterans and, well, those Vietnam guys, those are my heroes. They got spit at and they didn't get the parades. We got the parades. We got help from the VA. It was all because of them. So, although war is a terrible thing, the outreach of America is, it's a lot better.
You said God's at the top of your list. Did this experience strengthen your faith in God, or did it weaken your faith in God?
Oh, absolutely. It strengthened it.
Strengthen it?
Yeah, we had some, well, I remember one guy in particular, I won't name names, but he was in my team, and real diehard atheist. And, you know, he used to like to leave his science magazines around, and we'd kind of tease him about that, but very, very intelligent young man. And when those bullets started flying, he was asking us a little more about our faith. I didn't have a fear of death, I knew where I was going. Now, a fear of being maimed or, you know, a less than quality living of life, you know, that was a fear. One of our guys, some shrapnel left him. Well, and there was a lot of handicapped people over there. In front of our gates, there was a sign it was a banner that the Iraqis made. It was horribly misspelled, but it said the Iraqi Handicap Society says enough. And there was a lot of handicapped people in Iraq, just maimed over explosions and stray rounds and stuff like that. So I'm kind of all over the board. I've not done one of these before.
Oh, you're doing great. I'm keeping you on track.
Okay.
Let's kind of digress from combat. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions I ask all the World War II veterans, the Korean veterans, the Vietnam vets, and everybody else towards the end of an interview. But I want to know what the American flag means and represents to you as a veteran.
I gotta say freedom. I know that's a canned answer, but a buddy and I were looking at the flag at the VA hospital. We were taking a nightly walk, and he'd been partially crippled from an IED, and he looked up at it and he said, "Would you do it all over again?" And, you know, the flag was flapping in the breeze as if it were the last shot in a movie or something. And I said, yes, I would. And he agreed with me.
Tell me about freedom. What does freedom mean to you, and the price or the cost of freedom?
I can't even begin to describe what we take for granted in America. I've heard of other countries that try to rewrite in their own language our Declaration of Independence. But in those places where there's dictatorships and governments have way too much control, it just doesn't happen. We really do have, as a free country, the ability to do whatever we want within reason. And I saw that a lot in Iraq, in little bits and pieces, little glimmers. In the green zone shortly before we left, and it was a shame because it was right after that Abu Ghraib scandal happened. We were watching the Iraqi women start to gain some liberation, you know? They were starting to, the Iraqi people were starting to get their MTV, you know? And it was exciting. So I've kind of lost track of what happened to that country. I'd like to go back there again someday. I'm not ready right now. Maybe take my wife there and you know, when it's more stable, and just see how much they've progressed.
Well, you know, as far as patriotism, freedom, the flag, yesterday when I was talking to Sean, he made an interesting remark that I've never heard. We're talking about 9/11, the attacks on our country, and he made the remark how everybody became the next day. Everybody became an armchair patriot. You know, waving their flag and God bless America and all this stuff. And he said, you know, and then over time, it all went away.
Yeah,
And he says, why does it take 3,000 people getting killed in an attack to become patriotic? And then he said, we should be patriots 366 days a year, not just 365 days. His point was, you know, we should go beyond that. And yet, unfortunately, a lot of people don't seem to even care. You know?
well, Larry, I got to tell you, I appreciate you. You get it. There is some of that. Especially now, Afghanistan's still going on. There is a lot of, we support the troops. And a lot of organizations do truly support the troops. We have so many resources. But there are, I've not heard that before. I would imagine there are a lot of armchair with the flag. Sean said that?
Yeah, it was good. Very original.
Very well put.
Yeah, he said some pretty strong things, and he, you know, he went through a lot too. But it's like it was a real eye opener for me too, because I think he spoke, and I think you're speaking for a lot of other people too, a lot of veterans that I'll never talk to. So that's why I appreciate what you're sharing. And for the first time, Sean never told a story before yesterday. He never told a story, but he needed to.
I had some, I had some mixed feelings about, I like your work very much, and you're a very nice man. And I brought this in, but the paranoia took over. Am I going to say something that's still classified? And I don't know what's been declassified. I was the unit historian for the duration of my time there. So everything that happened with our unit that I witnessed on our missions, I'd have to write about once a month. So there's 12 reports, somewhere archived in wherever they keep that stuff. You probably have access to it now. And man, I'm way off topic.
No.
I'm sorry. What were we talking about?
Well, we were just talking about Sean and some of the things he said about patriotism, but let me just make an observation here. I've done about 1,000 interviews.
Wow.
You can imagine, spanning over 70 years. I even interviewed a World War I veteran. He was 107 years old. Okay, so I've interviewed all these veterans over time. And it's been an interesting study for me because I've never served in the military, but with my camera, for the last 10 years, I've been serving my country through the lens of that camera. And I'm proud of that. My father served during Korea. My uncle was in World War II. But I'm able to look somebody in the eye right now and tell them what combat looks like, what it sounds like, what it feels like, what it tastes like, and what it hear, see, smell, taste, touch, all the senses. I can tell somebody without ever having been there because of all the stories I've heard. You know?
Yeah.
I hear there's no fear in combat. The fear comes after the combat. I've heard all these amazing stories, and I'm not after the blood and guts of war, but yet they tell me these stories, you know? I hear the most amazing stories, but still, I'm after this personal side of how you went through it, and you come home now, you're trying to go on with your life and all that, but, you know, combat is hell, and war is hell, and freedom is not free. Those are the two common threads in all the stories I've done.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it's so different today than it was in World War II. You know, you're fighting a uniformed enemy back then. Today, Sean's brother was killed. And he said, this is kind of off the record, but he said at his funeral service, people came up to him and said, that this man, I think his name was Shane, he died for his country. Oh, he died for his country. And Sean says he had the thoughts of, you don't know what you're talking about. He's like he wanted those people just to shut up. He said Sean didn't die for his country. He didn't have any chance. An explosion killed him, and there was nobody there to fight back. So that was an interesting remark. Now, I think he died for his country, but it was a valid remark that, it made you think, did you die for your country? Well, of course you did. But when you really look at it like that explosion, he was gone. So, it's just, it was a different kind of thinking process. So I don't know why I shared that with you, just I guess because of combat and all the stories. Sometimes I go back to my hotel room and it's like, I look at the ceiling and I go, who can I talk to? I've heard all these stories. Nobody understands what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Same thing like you guys. It's like you go through this stuff, it's like, who's going to understand this stuff? So, anyways.
Well, Larry, I got to tell you, and you were talking about the armchair patriot. You are combating that. That's your war. You're making people aware. Typically, the general public wants the wars, and we all do, to be over, right? But with that, they want to forget about the veteran because it's associated with the war. And I mean, a lot of what we're doing now is tied back into 9/11, and I think I'm no filmmaker, and I just know my little tiny piece of the universe. It's just me. That's painful to watch. That's painful to remember. But we need to, so that it never happens again. And we need to remember the families, and we need to remember the soldiers. So your crusade is just as or more important than anything I did in one of many wars that we've done, So it feels good to share my story with whatever you use or whatnot, but just to get it off my chest that there is still people that care,
Well, you hit the nail on the head, man. I feel like I'm fighting my war.
Yeah.
In the fact that a lot of my veterans have died, in the fact that what you just said about the patriotism thing, in the fact that it's hard to look at a true story where we're being entertained by Hollywood everywhere. People want to go to a movie and come out feeling good, entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
But when they hear a true story, I think there's a responsibility attached to that story. Now I've got to do something about that. And I think a lot of people are running from that. And we're so desensitized in this country to where kids think war is a video game. They don't realize what war is. I had a 13-year-old, he got it. We had a program in a middle school. A 13-year-old said to me, with tears coming down his face, he said, war's not a game. He says, when you kill somebody, it changes you. This kid got it.
Yeah.
And he also said, I'm so blessed that I can go home free every day. 13-year-old kid he heard an 89-year-old World War II veteran talk, and he got that. And unfortunately, most of society doesn't get it.
Well, that's where you come in.
Yeah. And I'll need your prayers. Just pray for this work, because at times I feel like I'm the only one raising that flag or that banner or that whatever you call it, and nobody gives a damn. It's kind of like John the Baptist crying in the wilderness.
Mm-hmm.
Is anybody out there? Sometimes it feels like that. And I basically work for myself, but still. And I think about all the people and the lives I've touched.
Yeah.
They're nowhere to be found today. It's like they've abandoned. And these people pledged allegiance to my work, and they had emotion, and they said, I want to help you. And they're gone. Now, that's real personal. I don't
Yeah.
tell that. You're probably the first person I told that to in an interview, but I'm fighting my war. You're right.
That's nice to hear. I mean, it's nice to hear that you're candid with me. I appreciate that. It's also tough to hear because your work is great. I mean, last year when you did the 9/11, you brought it back up. You're this voice that doesn't go away, you know? As much as people want to forget stuff, how can they? Your documentaries, they're real. That woman up there talking about how she had to get out. You know, I mean, that stuck with me. That stuck with my wife. We were crying. And I think the human condition is out of survival. We want to just forget. Our flesh is weak, and it's not fun sometimes to see a documentary that's tragic, but it's needed. It's good for our souls. It makes us more human.
I just want to thank you on camera for your service to our country
It's my pleasure.
and for what you've done, and for your interview today. It was awesome, wonderful. Not that I'm grading it, but it was well done, and I appreciate you opening up and sharing it to me, probably for the first time, like you said.
Well, thank you, Larry, and thanks for all you do. Really.
Appreciate it. There's a mutual respect, and
You have a crusade, and
just say some prayers
yeah.
at some point, because I wanted to keep going.